there is a direct question for legal counsel, they will be here soon. But most of these questions I think are for staff. So why don't we get started here at 5:05?
Mina is here.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Brian, I was here when you said that too. So
Oh, even better. Cool. So we have here members Sumya Ganapathy, Bill Cummings, Paul Manganero, Pat Fortin, and Stephanie Zaremba, Lynn Sweet from LDS Consulting, Enzo Rascianato from FinCom, Marty Jones from Housing Partnership, and Beth Rudolph and Patty Mahalich and myself from staff. So I think even though Lynn is here at the moment, I think we should, like I said, because Beth has to leave at 6 and so do some others, that we go into the parking instead of finishing up the revenue questions that we were in the middle of last time. So the agenda for today is just to kind of very quickly review our schedule and then just continue with these questions. Few admin notes here that draft reports are due on the 4th in the morning. And then the staff will compile and offer comments on just the findings only. We will then meet on Friday the 8th and Tuesday the 12th. So now I'm gonna fast forward straight to the parking questions, and I'm gonna make these full screen if I can. Hopefully this is a little bit easier. So we're just gonna go through some of these questions unless anyone has any questions about the schedule or timing or anything related to the report.
I do, Brian.
Yes, Paul, please.
Okay. In regards to the report, you said you're going to report the findings, compile the findings, but we're allowed a narrative in there also, right? Or is this just going to be 6 items and here's how we rank them?
We're not boxing you in any way. I think the only thing staff is going to do in terms of the findings is make comments as if there are if it's under our department or if it relates to something that to any department specifically. So we will offer comments. We won't say that you need to change this or not. We will just offer comments on your findings only. But outside of that,
So like what Stephanie and somebody did, that's one of the formats we can use, kind of like a narrative.
The hope is that we will get more to the bottom of that, but yes, the hope is that we can get more to the bottom of the structure of the report at the next meeting, and we're
okay.
The short answer is yes,
Okay,
as a draft.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I guess let's just we'll move forward with parking. So I'll probably just gonna read these questions, and then I think if there are questions for the Beth Rudolph, the town engineer, I think we just open it up, question by question. There are a decent amount of these, but we do have 2 hours tonight, and the point is to get through all of these. And then I believe there are about 12 to 14 questions that we did not get through related to the revenue. So we're just gonna go, here we go. So the task force was waiting to get Civico's comments on giving the town $2.8 million in exchange for not building the 40 public spaces. $2.8 million is what the developer claims they'd be spending for the 40-unit underground garage. It would seem the town would have many options related to the parking if those funds were available. So the answer from staff is that Civico is willing to discuss a payment as part of the negotiations with the town if they don't have to build a garage as part of the project. However, given the public comments about parking downtown, they have concerns that foregoing on-site parking for the public will adversely impact their ability to receive local regulatory approvals. So are there any questions on this answer that staff has compiled? You just come out and say it as a little, since I have this, if anyone has any, I can't see everyone's screen with not enough screen space.
So it seems that Civico would be willing to negotiate and just build parking for the residents, but not for the public. So there wouldn't be a garage. Is that,
Well, that was the
Uh,
question. That was the question that was directed towards Civico, and they're willing to discuss that.
okay.
It was not, yeah, just, yeah. I'll keep moving forward unless someone's going to stop me.
I will, excuse me. Yeah, I think the purpose, though, the intent there would be get the money and see if we can utilize it for a better parking opportunity downtown. We had mentioned a garage where that might not be feasible, but would leave it up to the experts to figure out where that money could maybe be better used for more spaces for downtown parking. That was the assumption I was under.
Yep. So that would be a clear recommendation on your report, and probably not necessarily a finding, but a clear recommendation. Next question. Beth has mentioned a few times the town cannot or will not build a garage because the costs get elevated dramatically due to the required prevailing wage laws. So what if we included the Aberjona lot in the lease and required the developer to build the garage and then turn over operations to the town? So there have been comments in our meetings that a private developer could actually build a garage for under 2.8 million, but they could just eliminate the underground garage and build an above ground garage on Aberjona. So this is related to that other question. Beth, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah. So it was less about, I was kind of just reiterating for this group what happened back in 2017. So again, the select board hired Walker parking consultants at the time to evaluate several parking garage locations around the town. They presented those concept level plans and, with concept level cost estimates to the board at the time. The board decided at that time not to move forward with further design or evaluation of any of those locations due to the financial and logistic constraints that were identified by the consultant. Obviously, future boards could make a different decision. So if that's a recommendation of this group, that's certainly something for the select board to consider. I know I mentioned this before, but I wanted to have it formally in the response. So Walker looked at adding a deck to the Aberjona lot, which created between 84 and 86 additional spaces at a cost of $5.2 million, which was the 2017 cost estimate. So I can tell you that's probably 25% or higher these days with the prices we're seeing now. I will say that the concept plans did not take into account the proposed layout of the MBTA station with the ramp in that area, an elevator. So it would need to be reevaluated based on that MBTA layout, which does significantly impact the amount that that could be used for a deck space. So I do think it would reduce the number of spaces. The last question or last answers here about the town cannot require a developer to build and turn over a garage to the town without triggering public bidding laws. So we can't take it as a donation. And the last point, which isn't really an engineering item, but I think Lynn or Marty had added this, that the cost of the garage Civico proposes the Waterfield lot is offset by subsidy assistance, which would not carry over to the Aberjona lot. So if there's specific questions about that last point, probably Lynn or Marty are the best sources. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. The floor is open for questions related to specifically the Aberjona lot parking garage.
Brian, I did have one question.
Please.
Since there are not any subsidies with the Aberjona lot, would it be less attractive to Civico because they wouldn't get the subsidies? Or is that negotiable?
Lynn, would you like to take that if you could? Or it's possible.
Or I can chime in if.
Yes, please.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Lynn. Yeah, go ahead.
Please, Lynn. Yep.
I thought the first part was going to be on parking, so as anyway. Can you repeat the question?
I was just wondering since there would not be subsidies if the parking garage was not built on site, are there any, would that be a deterrent for Civico to build a garage off-site, like in the Aberjona lot?
Okay, so the subsidies are coming from the tax credits. So they're not going out and getting specific funding to build the parking garage from a parking garage source of funding. They're trying to use monies that are coming in related to housing development to build the parking garage and the market rate units to subsidize the funding of the parking garage. So if they didn't have to build the parking garage, then they could pay more towards the purchase price of the property rather than taking those funds to build the parking garage. And we don't know what that dollar amount is going to be. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
And-
thank you.
Yeah.
And
I think their concern is politics at the end of the day, the politics, which is first they have to get awarded the project, but then they also have to go through a zoning permitting process. And if they are not, if the sentiment is that the town really actually wanted parking spaces there, it could impede them from getting to the finish line on a project. So they could get through hurdle 1, but not through hurdle 2.
Okay.
I think the other question that the town would have to talk to Civico about, if you go down this path of somehow they build the garage, they didn't bid on having to go through the very complicated permitting process, construction process, MBTA, Rivers Act, all that stuff to build a garage. So somebody earlier had talked about linking these together somehow, how they would build it. And that was never kind of part of the scope. And it would be a huge project for the town or for anybody to get the right permits to build a garage in that location. And so I haven't discussed Civico whether they'd be willing to do it, but
I can guarantee
definitely expanding, a very risky proposition because of the complexity there.
Right. And to echo what Marty said, and I have discussed this with Civico, they would basically give you the money, no strings attached. You need to go and the town would need to figure it out on its own. Their responsibility is to themselves to build the affordable housing. That's what they do. They don't go out and permit and build municipal parking garages.
Bill, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Beth, the cost figures that you anticipated might be up 25% over the number that you had earlier discussed to build a garage now versus earlier. Is it reasonable to assume that since the $2.8 million was determined to be a price, that those numbers have also escalated since that time?
I can't speak for Civico's pricing. I was just noting this report was from 2017. I'm sure we all see it with, even going to the grocery store, right? The cost of doing business around the world has increased significantly. We're seeing it in our own bid prices here in Winchester, but I can't speak for Civico's pricing.
I'm not asking you to speak for Civico at all. I'm asking your opinion. Would you imagine that whatever the price was that they estimated it would cost to build those garage spaces, the 40 spaces on the site, when somebody determined that number was 2.8 million? Since that number was determined, there's been no time in history that prices have gone up any more than they have on construction, particularly the steel and concrete that are the largest, by far the largest percentage of a parking deck, have gone up enormously for most places. And I'm asking you, is it reasonable to assume that they've gone up in Winchester as well? And I think it's it is reasonable, but I'm just looking
Yeah,
at.
again, I'm not going to speak to the 2.8 number. I have no idea where that number came from, but I will tell you that the bid prices we've seen in Winchester are higher for the most part. The MBTA just bid their project in August. They had a $54 million budget, and that came in 15% high over budget overall. So that's an example of a bid at this site that was just.
So my point, yeah, if you would agree that it's reasonable to imagine that their prices, the prices to their estimate of 2.8 million was determined not in August, but sometime before that.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to speak to Civico's numbers, but I'll agree with you that in general prices are higher. Yeah.
Sure,
I did actually
wait,
ask them to update their numbers, and they did have some.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so they feel comfortable with the numbers that they've given today.
Well, that would be a good answer to give if they didn't want to give any more than 2.8 million. But there's no reason they should feel comfortable with that number.
No, I mean, I asked them to look at their per square foot construction costs, and I asked them to look at their affordable rents and market rate rents, and to update the pro forma with any changes, so that the numbers that we're looking at today are numbers that they have updated. I understand the point that you're trying to make is that you don't necessarily believe in those numbers, but the question was asked and answered by them.
Yeah, but asked and answered, but not in a reasonable manner. If we're looking to evaluate if the builder has an obligation to build X number of units, which they earlier identified, for which they earlier identified a cost of 2.8 million. And if most reasonable people today would agree readily that that number would cost them quite a bit more than 2.8 million if it was a valid number before, it would cost quite a bit more today. So the number that they would contribute, if they were going to contribute something in lieu of the garage spaces, would be some number higher than 2.8, because the ultimate cost to build the garage is going to be more than 2.8. Certainly it would be one whole lot less if it wasn't built for the town, and a dramatic difference, and more dramatic than most of you would probably realize. But the number, the 2.8 number, shouldn't be the starting point. That's the only point I wanted to get across.
Thank you, Bill, for that. Stephanie, you have your hand is up.
It's not worth taking time on. We can move on.
Okay. I think, yeah, the point is that if we do even believe the 2.8, that 2.8 is 3.5 right now, 25% escalated. Bill's nodding, okay? So that maybe that 2.8 is maybe not 2.8 is what Bill is saying, but it could be 3.5.
And that 25%, I mean, I'm
that-
just
no-
throwing
no
that
one's-
number out there as
no
an
one's-
example of like, it's higher than it was in 2017. So that's only the point I'm trying to make.
All right.
So Brian, I can't raise my hand because I'm on my phone, so I'm just gonna have to jump in when I need to jump in.
Please, this was your question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, most of these are my questions, and really what I'm trying to do is find a solution from a problem. I feel like everybody's trying to figure out how to kill ideas. We have a problem here. All of us do. The town voted to reject this proposal, and one of the main components was you have an RFP that when it deals with parking says that the development should replace, the lost parking. We're losing 93 spaces, and the best we have is replacing 20. So in my view, the RFP doesn't go anywhere near what it was trying to do, and I think that's what the voters have said, and people that have talked to me are trying to find a way to get more parking. So all I'm trying to do is come up with, and maybe they're crazy ideas, I don't know, there's people on this call that know more about construction than me, but I'm trying to find solutions, not to shoot down ideas, but to make things work. And if outside of finding a way to improve the parking here, which every time there's an idea, there's all these barriers. I mean, I could see taking 2.8 or 3.5 million dedicated to the parking garage. You can make residents happy with that. And you, at the same time, you put this on town meeting, you put an override on town meeting for another 3 million to build the garage. And the whole thing goes together or it dies. I mean, to me, that's a viable opportunity that's maybe it's not the right answer, but it's one answer. But it seems like every question is, oh, that won't work, this is there. We've got to find some spaces, or you may have the same problem when town meeting rejects this. So I think Civico is a bigger problem, that the town voted no on this, at least in my view, mostly related to revenue, transparency and opportunity, and parking. And so we can just sit here and say there's nothing we can do, but then you're at the mercy of town meeting and the voters again. So that's really all I'm trying to do. I agree with where Bill's going. There's no question this is up, Beth. I don't know why you're scared to answer the question. This is, Civico's not, doesn't work for us, and this is a town project and it's taxpayer land. We should get as much money out of Civico as we can. And if we can get 3.5 million, that's a good start for a garage. And if it's dedicated as part of the approval process with the selectmen and the RFP, then they're not going to have political backlash. People are going to be excited. We have 3.5 million to move in the right direction. So I'm not trying to be a pain with the questions. I'm really trying to fix a problem.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on this 3.5 number, if you don't mind. Civico basically allocated a portion of their construction costs for the square footage that the garage is taking up. If they were to go and build this as a standalone, it probably would be a different cost than incorporating it as an overall building development. So I'm kind of uncomfortable with throwing around the 2.8 or the 3.5 because the 2.8 is part of a larger development pro forma. Thank you.
But 2.8 is the number they're using to reduce the price and compensation to the town. They picked that number. We didn't make it. They're the ones that made the mistake and went first and said, because we have to do the garage, it's 2.8. So they're using that in all their adjustments and not revenue sharing with the town and building it into the cost. It's even on your spreadsheets as the town's getting 2.8 million in benefits. So if that's not a real number, then these numbers are fraudulently inflated. We should be dealing with real numbers. They stepped up and said that. So I think they're on the hook for 2.8. They're the ones that did it, not us.
I'm taking section to the 3.5 portion of the conversation because that's not a number that they've participated in discussing. And I'm trying to say that the way they came up with this number is it's proportional of their overall development pro forma.
So
this is subjective conversation. I don't know why you're so defensive of Civico when you're really here for the town. So I think we should be talking about a way to help the town get the best deal, not be so worried about what Civico thinks. I sort of feel like Civico's who we all work for, and we're more concerned about keeping them happy than our taxpayers and the people that voted no.
Stephanie's had her hand up for a while.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
A few things. I want to reiterate, we are not here to pre-negotiate the entire deal. We're here to make findings and recommendations. And I think it's very clear that one of our recommendations is that the select board might have something to play with here. A negotiation goes back and forth. We don't get to go back and forth. So really our recommendation has to end at the fact that there might be something that can be done here. And I think it's a waste of time to keep debating numbers that we have no control over and that we can't go back and forth and negotiate on. Second thing, I think it's unfair to say that someone's defending Civico. What Civico thinks does matter insofar as if we tell the select board that they have to do something that's absurd and Civico walks away, there's no more development here, though I understand that might be what some people want. Thirdly, just on an aside, it's the select board. They're not selectmen. They haven't been selectmen in a while. And I've heard from a lot of people, it grates every time. So can we please use the right terms?
That's totally false. They have Pembroke, the second bidder, in the wing. So at least the select board has a little advantage in the negotiation because they have another developer waiting in the wings. And I'm getting a little tired of people accusing people on this committee about the affordable housing wanting to go away. It's not true, and it must stop because it's divisive. Thank you.
Anything else related specifically to Aberjona? We do have actually a lot of questions, and that there are a lot of that we answered for the meeting that we'd like to be able to get through. Sumya.
Oh, I was just going to comment on the Pembroke proposal, Paul. It looks like it has less parking, less public parking than the Civico proposal.
Correct, but because of the vote in June, all negotiations are open. Now that deal is dead. So they get a second opportunity to look at it, and hopefully we make strong recommendations of what the public wants, and we get a little bit of everything, and they can go back and figure it out.
Bill, one more comment, and then I think, again, I'd like to get through just the data, at least presenting it. You'll have copies of this, but in terms of debating, I think that's part of this process, and I'm really thankful that everyone is doing all of this in public, that we're talking about this. This is important. Sorry, Bill, please go ahead.
To close this section anyway, it seems to me that the comments that Pat Fortin just made effectively are saying that we should be here looking to get to yes, rather than all the reasons why nothing could work, and we probably could never do anything like that, and we shouldn't even try. And that's, if the town wants to put a garage in, things can be so much easier than they would be if the town didn't want to put a garage in. But if there's a facility, it makes such a world of difference what's being built and who's building it and how it's being built and for what purpose. So there's a whole lot of things. The Fortin idea of having the building structure built, if it was going to happen, as on the same lot, add the space on the Aberjona lot to his suggestion, I believe, was to add the two lots together, put them on one deed with a railroad track running in between them. And you'd have one project straddling the tracks on both sides. And that'd be the type of thing that would be different. But just because it's been different, I've never seen it done before. But I looked at it when I first saw it and said, wow, that makes all kinds of good sense. I'm talking now strictly from the point of view of a significant property developer. We've done millions and millions of feet of construction. And that's the type of thinking that if the town got behind it and liked it, there are ways to make those things happen with special regulations adopted by the representatives in the House legislature, and whatever else needed to be done. It could happen. And I just leave you with that thought in mind on that area.
Stephanie, about the Aberjona or something different?
I had a process question, but I'll keep researching it and email you if it's still.
Okay, we'll move on from Aberjona. Future overrides. So I've been asked by residents if the town has any plans for additional overrides. This relates to finances here, as some residents want to understand the overall financial impacts. Maybe Enzo could answer this one. However, town leadership should have an idea of the impending town's financial needs and how this piece impacts that. So future potential overrides discussed include an override and funding for the Lynch School construction. Timing and amounts have not been discussed. If anyone has any questions, does anybody have questions about this? Bill and then Enzo about future overrides. Sorry, Bill, you're muted.
That was an accidental hand raise. I'm sorry.
No worries. Enzo, future overrides.
I was just going to say that, this is something that we look at extensively every year around the overrides for the town budget, right? So obviously Lynch is definitely right there on the horizon. We're eventually, we just did one for the culvert last year, the Morocco culvert. And we're looking at what our overall budget, every year we get closer and closer to an override, right? So I think we're trying to make sure we push it out to, I think, 2025, I think, based on the current assumptions. Obviously, a lot of things changed this year with the budget. The budget was favorable. There were a lot of turnbacks this year. So we're working through the latest and greatest budgets and 3-year plan. But, the idea is to try to, push out the overrides as long as possible and try to maintain the existing budget as long as possible without the overrides.
Sorry about that. Enzo, there was a slide out of order, but so I'm gonna get the parking ones back up, but you got that one, revenue one for free. If anyone does have the further questions about that, we're still gonna try to move towards the parking because we have staff leaving at 6 about the parking. So give me just 1 second and then I will put up what we need. Okay. So availability of public parking. So how many public parking spaces exist in the core downtown? And can we see that on a
Brian, I
map?
can't actually see maybe I can't see your screen.
You cannot. Okay.
Either.
How about now?
Oh. It just says Brian Zachelia started screen sharing.
Interesting. I'll try one more time. You're not seeing a PDF? No one's seeing a PDF? Okay.
Do you want me to share it because I have it ready?
Hold on, I can. How about now?
No.
Doing what I always do. Don't know if you want to throw the PDF up that I sent out. I have no idea. So you're going to have to go down to slide number 22. Yep. One up, please. Availability of public parking. So how many public parking spaces exist in the core downtown? So the map that I wish I could show you right now is the downtown map, but I don't know if you can actually click on that or copy and paste that. And sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone.
If we want, Patty, it's on the engineering web page. We can, if you wanted to go there. If not, the map's available again on the engineering website. It was created as part of the parking program downtown. It shows the number of spaces generally, plus or minus. I'm sure there's a few off, and then the regulations in that area. So 1 hour, 2 hour permit, 3 hour. It's also in the presentation I gave on parking earlier in the task force meeting schedule.
So I'm trying to share my screen again, and it's showing that I'm sharing, but nothing is here.
Yeah, no, it's not there.
Okay.
I don't think this one's critical, so if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, on the map.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is certainly going to be more difficult if we're not actually looking at the answers. I mean, like I said, everyone just did get the PDF sent out to them. Patty, are you not able to share that PDF?
I closed it, so I'm going to open it back up again. So hold on a sec. Give me 1 minute.
Right.
Pat, do you have any questions on the parking map while we're waiting?
No, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I didn't have time to look at it, but at least we have it. I was just trying to understand percentage-wise, how the Waterfield 100 spaces, what does that relate to? And then the other 100 roughly that are gone from some of the changes, just proportionally, how do those impact? So I'm with you. I would just move on, and at least we have it. And if anybody wants to study it, they can study it, and
sure.
And just save time. At least we have it.
Yeah, we'll have everything else except for those two maps, but they will show the numbers that you're talking about in terms of any losses or gains in parking. So we are going to get to that. So why don't we move on to parking ratios? Next slide. And it's a clarification on whether it's 0.5 spaces or 0.75 spaces and how that works. So it says, can you clarify what spaces are used, and is there a state zoning threshold? So we'll start there and say the Center Business District minimum requirement is 0.75 spaces, and Civico is proposing 0.75 spaces per unit. The developments that are within 800 feet of the train station are allowed to go down to 0.5 spaces per unit. So that's the breakdown in terms of what's the difference. It's that the base zoning is 0.75 spaces per unit, but if you're near transit, you're allowed to go to 0.5. Civico is proposing the 0.75. Is there a state zoning threshold? So there's no state threshold for parking minimums. Buildings are built in Massachusetts with zero parking. And then there was a question about like looking at other towns and their parking minimums, if they're similar or we should just kind of use them for valuable insight. And looking at other towns, the parking minimums are anywhere from 0.75 to 1.5 in some of the similar districts. However, there's a lot of districts that this parking is not similar to the Center Business District. But and there are special permits and there are payments that are also given in those off-street parkings. Those occur frequently and especially in affordable housing developments. So when there's an affordable housing development, the parking ratio tends to get lower than 1 or potentially 0. Not certainly in these towns, but in these towns it is at least a 1 or lower for some affordable projects. The most recent study recommended in the town center for it to be 0.5 spaces per unit, and further studies are underway. Are there any questions about parking ratios and looking at other towns and state zoning thresholds related to that, parking ratios? Okay.
Not by me. Good job. Good job.
Sure. Can we please move on to the next slide? So can the task force get a detailed list of parking passes specifically for these years? So right now we have fiscal year of 20, which is June 30th of 19 to July 1st of 20. These numbers are rather consistent from year to year. So why don't we go down, and I'm going to turn it over to Beth to explain a little bit of this.
Yeah, so this was in the presentation I gave on parking a couple weeks ago. So we sell one permit that's good at all of our off-street and on-street permit parking spaces. There are 56 permit spaces in the Waterfield lot. 28 of those are what we call early bird permits, because the Waterfield lot is signed for no parking before 8:45 a.m. Because the preference is for town center employees in that location. So those early bird spaces are sold to 28 town center employees every year to allow them to park before 8:45 in the Waterfield lot. Town center employees are sold at $10 per year. There's just around 750 to 800 permits a year sold, I would say. Again, not all those people are parking downtown at once because of shift working. And then also if people leave, we don't require them to return the permit. So, there could be turnover in staff over the course of a year. CBD residents, so the select board started this program a couple of years ago that allows up to 25 Center Business District residents who don't have off-street parking, so they have to provide proof that they do not have off-street parking, to purchase a parking permit for up to for $10. And just as a reminder, the parking permits are just for daytime parking. You can park in the lots between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. For free year-round. Commuter permits, annual permits are $500 a year. So these are just for Winchester residents. In that time frame, we sold 65. That's typical, I would say. And then you can see for quarter 1, 2, and 3, it's very consistent. We sell, right around 175 commuter permits. the Q4, which was April to June, was just at the start of COVID closure. So that number is kind of much lower than the rest of them. But yeah, so that's basically, I would say that was, again, that was June 2019 through July 1st of 2020. So aside from the last quarter there, I would say it's a pretty typical year.
Thanks. Any questions about parking pass program that's used for the center? Okay, Patty, next slide. So there have been recent negotiations with Civico to amend some of the units the task force requested, and this has kind of been talked about a little bit already this evening, of giving the town 2.8 needed to build the 40 spaces, but Civico has not responded, but actually we had already said that they're willing to explore this option as part of the renegotiating of the LDA with the select board. Are there any questions about this? So. All right, keep moving. Public parking for residents. So has any discussion occurred within Civico to get an agreement that residents of the building will not be permitted to use the included town public spaces? So not at this time. The town does not currently sell up. I'm sorry, the town does currently sell up, like Beth just said, 25 CBD resident permits for $10 each. And Winchester residents can purchase a permit for $500 a year. Additionally, these lots are open, like was just said, from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. for anyone to park. So permits are only required for that daytime parking. Further questions around the parking related to the residents that are going to be there, and so make sure that they are not used for public spots.
I have one, Brian. It's not directly towards that, but it's a reference to the public spots. I'm on the assumption, I want to know if I'm correct or not, is there going to be a charge to the public to park in the public spots? And if so, who gets that revenue?
I don't believe that has been renegotiated as part of the LDA.
Yeah, I think that's something to be negotiated by the town. It hasn't been negotiated yet because the use of those spaces was a little unclear to Civico, and so now that'll have to get worked out in the renegotiation. So,
what's the assumption now going in then, based on?
I think Lynn can confirm they have zero revenue.
Correct.
Because they're not sure what the deal's going to be. And the
Right.
question will be who maintains it, right? Somebody's got to pay to maintain it. Somebody's got to pay to enforce the rules. So that whole operating thing has got to be a part of this negotiation.
Doesn't the pro forma though? Doesn't the pro forma have parking revenue in it?
The original pro forma had parking revenue in it because the developer assumed that the spaces were going to be used for commuter parking. So the current pro formas and what we'll be talking about a little bit later tonight assumes no parking revenue. And that's because the discussions, at least with this task force so far, have been that they want to use the spaces for metered parking, public parking, which has a minimal amount of revenue.
Stephanie, your hand's raised.
I have a question maybe for Pat. There'd been some concern expressed that the parking ratios that in like a 3-bedroom unit, you may very well have a family with 2 cars, and the resident spaces might not accommodate families with 2 cars. Would it impact the chamber and local businesses if residents of Waterfield were using the quote public garage for overnight parking? Do businesses care about that after 6 p.m. time, or are we really focused on that daytime availability to businesses?
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad question. I mean, a lot of like restaurants are open all night, so potentially that parking would be important. My concern is, the research I've done, which is pretty anecdotal. Again, I don't want to pretend I'm a development expert, is that, with the type of income, even in these affordable units and what it is, that it's completely crazy to think there's only going to be 45 cars living in, 106 bedrooms. People I know that have built big buildings have said, I would like to build that building with 100 spaces. If they're building an apartment building so they can give people spaces they need. So that's really all I'm trying to figure out is, if there are an extra 50 cars and they just move right into the public garage, you really haven't accomplished anything except you're giving the developer free parking for their residents. So I get why the zoning's done. And I really wonder if when you get into affordable housing, if there's more bedrooms. I don't know enough about it to know. But I mean, there's a lot of talk about the Fells project for people over there in that area that, buildings that are built with those lifts, no one ever uses them. So it gets you the permitting and lets you build the units, and then those people just park on the street and drive around all day. So you're seeing it on Dick Street. I mean, Dick Street has 12 units. The building Mike Manzo built has 12 units, has I think 23 parking spaces, might even be 24. It's 2 for every unit, might be 1. And the neighbors up there are fighting with the building all the time because they're parking all over the street because people have kids there or they have an extra car. And that's a little building that has great parking. So that's just all I'm really trying to figure out. Is this building going to flood the downtown and people are going to be bouncing all over the place to make things work? So I don't know the night question. I think that would be a better question for restaurants. It depends. There's more parking around town, obviously, at night. I just felt like we have leverage with Civico, and if we're stuck with the 20 spaces, that would be one option, would be to say those people aren't eligible to buy those resident spaces. That's going to be a selectman call. I'm just trying to understand to help make good recommendations. I mean, a lot of these may seem kind of speculative all over the place, but it's just looking for options to give selectmen some help in trying to figure what we need to do.
Okay. I think that we should keep moving. And I guess also reiterate that it's the select board. Number of cars. Has any study been done or could it be done to determine how many actual cars will exist on the current design? So these are typically done during the permitting process. So they would have a traffic engineer review it, give their report, and then we would hire a peer reviewer to analyze the study performed by the applicant. Any further questions about a traffic study done for this site currently, which the answer is no, a study has not been done. That's typically done during permitting. Sumya. Sorry, you're muted, Sumya.
Sorry about that. With similar affordable housing projects, is it in towns like Winchester? I was just curious if anybody knows how many vehicles come with each unit on average. Is it really the 0.75 that's mandated by the state, or is it less or more?
The only recent one would be River Street, which is not near transit, which I believe is 1 space per unit. And I'll be honest, I don't have that exact number, but it's certainly not 2. It's probably somewhere around 1. I can get that answer for you.
I can speak about other projects that I've had that not everyone who has an affordable unit has a car. Some of them use ride sharing services. Some of them are elderly and they use public transportation, or they have friends drive them. I am aware that most of the developments in the greater Boston area don't provide one-for-one parking. So it's expensive to own a car, as we all know. And this is located next to public transportation. But if there's another, point of review, we can probably dig up some actual comps.
Beth, follow up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things we've talked about over the years is trying to develop some kind of ride sharing service in Winchester, like a Zip car service or something. This could be a good place to do that so that residents of this building wouldn't necessarily always have to have a car, and that it could be a resource for other residents in downtown Winchester and Winchester in general. So that might be something that the task force might want to consider as a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Sumya, do you still have your hand up, or you're good? Okay.
Sorry.
Any questions, again, related to number of cars or some type of traffic study?
I would just like to make a follow-up comment, like, they're all good ideas that were thrown out there, but they're all hypothetical, like with the car sharing, and maybe people won't have cars, but I think for the planning purposes, based on what Brian just said at River Street too, I think it'd be logical and the right thing to do to plan on at least one car per unit, which would be 60 cars. If the other stuff came to fruition, that would be great, but I haven't seen it happen here in 45 years. I remember when they had the little transportation buses going back and forth to different locations, and I'm talking probably about 35, 40 years ago, and it fizzed out pretty fast. So I think we can hope for the best, but plan for what's maybe a little more realistic.
So Paul highlights a potential recommendation of with the question of, you know, what to do with the 40 public spots. One of them could be dedicating, if they're going to be building it, it could be given towards the building, and maybe it's 60-20 or whatever ratio you want to do. But the point is that is a very important question that should probably be a recommendation of what to do with those 40 spots. Downtown parking plan. So can the town confirm if there's a global plan for parking for the entirety of the 500 to 600 bedrooms that will potentially be added downtown, and an unknown number of cars, and what these additional cars will be doing to parking availability or parking inventory? So Tool Design is currently in the process of completing a parking management study to look at short-term mitigation strategies associated with the loss of parking for the MBTA project and other downtown initiatives. Their study will include a limited discussion of long-term opportunities, but it is expected that a larger parking study would be completed at some point in the future. Does anyone have a question about the long-term, what's referred to as in this question as a global plan for parking within the downtown? All right, thank you, Patty. Prior parking studies. Oh, I believe we went. I think this might have been this was another question, but I believe there's a lot of overlap with the one saying that a lack of financial viability from the studies from any parking structure in town. Do these reports have options for garages that could be created as a capital investment? So Select Board hired Walker in 2016 to evaluate the cost and feasibility of those behind the public safety building, the Jenks lot in Aberjona, and the Wedgemere station. The consultant developed a series of concept plans and high-level cost estimates. So this information was presented to the Select Board, who decided not to move forward at the time with pursuing further design or analysis of those locations. Future boards could make a different decision and initiate additional investigations. Does anyone have questions for Beth? She has a few more minutes here. Does anyone have questions for Beth related to prior parking studies done in the downtown?
Brian, is that study posted? Do we have that in our, can we put it somewhere that we could look at if we want? Because those are good locations and good ideas.
You do, yeah, you do have, you definitely have the Walker parking. And the study, as this answer says, it's really just a set of schematic plans. It's a set of schematics and it shows the cost per added space. But there's not like a report or a narrative, correct, Beth?
Yeah, so there was concept plans done for each of those locations listed here. And on that concept plan, it has like the financial information listed with the cost per space and that information. I'm not sure, Brian, is that information on the website for all of those locations or just for the Aberjona lot?
I will coordinate with Patty. I believe it was one of the packets that showed all of the concept plans.
Okay.
And not just the Aberjona, but
we can send them out again.
Yeah, we can certainly, we have those.
Brian, if you could connect it to the Waterfield development site, just because then I can just drive people, you know, a lot of these are coming from questions people are asking too. So if it's on the same site with everything, I can drive people to the Waterfield link and have them look for the parking study tab or something.
That is the clearinghouse. That is where all information, all of your packets, all of the recordings, everything has been put to one site. So that is where you should get that information. Prior parking studies, unfortunately, before staff leaves, are there any other questions related to prior parking studies at the moment? Okay, Patty, let's move on. For those that need to leave, unless actually, Beth, if you, I don't know what your time schedule is in terms
Yeah,
of.
I have like another minute or two. But
Maybe we just go to parking inventory, the next one.
Yeah,
And we'll
that's
come
fine.
back to the
Yeah.
appraisal in just a second. We could go to parking inventory. So parking inventory has changed dramatically since the RFP was created. This is the question. Has the town or staff looked at how these changes can impact the overall availability of parking in the town with the addition of the Waterfield units? So since the RFP was issued, we've lost about 5 spaces due to some construction in the town center. We've lost another 20 on-street 2-hour spaces due to outdoor dining. We've gained 77 new free 2-hour spaces in the Aberjona and Waterfield lots. So what staff is saying is that parking inventory for 2-hour spots has increased by more than about 50 due to the elimination of the commuter spots during COVID. So the staff, we have not looked at how temporarily eliminating these commuter spots is and making them 2-hour, how that would affect the development or anything. We have not looked at that. We have just basically taken those commuter spots and made them 2-hour for free spots. Beth, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just so last summer when the select board decided to move forward with the on-street dining spaces, they did make these changes both in the Waterfield lot and Aberjona lot to try to offset the loss of those spaces, and also just knowing that the commuter traffic was pretty much non-existent or very limited over the past year or so. So yeah, and I think the spaces on street, we lost a few on Waterfield Road because of the crosswalk that we put in the bikeway, but we actually gained a few towards Mystic Valley Parkway. So it was maybe a loss of 1 total. And then there's a loss of 1 or 2 spaces at the Waterfield at Church Street intersection, because when we do the reconfiguration, we're actually going to gain a few. So overall, it won't be as dramatic, even though it looks like it'll be maybe a loss compared to where it was a few years ago. But yeah, I don't have time for a ton of questions on this, but Pat, if you have specific questions, I'm happy to walk through any comments or questions you have.
Thanks for that clarification, Beth. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys.
See you, Marty. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me, Brett, maybe I'm reading this wrong, stuff, but this shows the growth of parking spots, but is it a true assumption that the Waterfield lots will disappear once the building's erected? Except for those 40 spots that we get back.
Totally correct. We were basically, we did not, when it said this was a kind of addressing this first thing where it says parking inventory has changed dramatically. And we were saying that, since in the past 2 years, and we're saying that it has changed in the fact that we've gotten a lot more 2-hour spots. That's the only change that we're acknowledging, meaning in terms of parking inventory, is that there was an increase in all of these 2-hour spots due to the elimination of the commuter spots. That's all we were saying.
Okay, because then I was reading the last part of about Waterfield units. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, we did not see how that would affect the Waterfield development at all, period. We'll just keep moving. Actually, no, keep moving forward. Sorry. Yep. So this is the last one of the parking questions, and then we will go back to the revenue ones. So this was more of a legal question that was asked. We do have legal counsel here if there are further questions about this one. So is it true that Civico can actually opt out completely from building the 40 public spaces? And what would trigger this, and what recourse does the town have? So Mina, would you, if you please, expand on this slide or explain the answer? Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. So this is sort of the formal written answer, but in the short answer is Civico can't do it on its own. The town could negotiate with Civico. Civico has to build what it proposed, which means it has to build the 40 public spaces. The way out of that is if it asks to do something different, or if the town asks it to do something different and there's agreement, then that could be altered in the proposal. Or in the lease, I should say.
But from the previous comment, I forget who made it, but it's still, those 40 spaces still up for negotiation, whether they'll be metered and the revenue will be generated and who would get that, correct?
Yes, in a sense, although if it becomes a town owned lot, that would change how it's built. It would have to become part of a public, it would become a public works project. It would have to be bid out separately for construction.
So Civico wouldn't be building it?
Not necessarily, no. They would have to bid on it like others would, yeah. If it
And that
becomes a
would also
town
increase
owned
the
project.
cost of it because it would bring in prevailing wages, et cetera, because it's a town project.
Potentially, Lynn, I would just say that because all of this is on town land, all of the project has to be prevailing wage or likely will have to be. So that part is a little different, but in terms of public bidding, we'd have to publicly procure, which has some other costs involved too.
Thank you.
So Mina, it's Patrick, can I jump
Yeah.
in just so basically any change to the garage has to be mutually agreed upon. I had heard, and again, this is people talking that Civico had a buyout or an option to eliminate the garage. So none of that is true. It's just strictly, any contract you can mutually change. So there's no different language in there than that.
We looked at it again today just to confirm, but the LDA does say that you build the proposal that's provided, and the proposal that's provided has that in it. The one difference, I guess I would say, is it contemplates that this might be an object of further discussion later. So it's different only in that sense, but it would have to be agreed to by the town. And Marty or Brian, if you know something different, certainly let me know, but that's our reading of it.
I have nothing
So
to
your
add.
read is that, if they didn't want to build the garage, you would have to agree. What if the town said, we don't care, we want you to build the garage? Can they walk away from the proposal, or are they just contractually bound, they have to build it?
When you say walk away from the proposal, I guess at this point, Pat, if they say we no longer want to do what we proposed, they'd essentially be, have to look back at the RFP. Usually RFPs have a sunset date of how long a proposal is good for, which we may be past at this point, given how long it's been. That being said, what they can't do is say, no, we get to build everything else. You have to sign, but we won't do the thing we proposed in the beginning of the RFP, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just someone who read the agreement.
Sorry?
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just saying that, we remember that all of this, they have the land development agreement, which was signed and is not approved because one of the requirements of that is town meeting approval. So that can be renegotiated. And then there's a lease that has to be negotiated. So they're not going to be able to build everything else without the town knowing whether they will or will not build the garage. If after agreeing in a new LDA or a revoted LDA or the lease that they're going to build parking, they nonetheless refuse to do it, that would be a breach of that agreement.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's what I was trying to, obviously this whole thing's up in the air. because stuff's going to get thrown at them. So it's really, there's no contract and you're starting over. I was just wondering if they were trying to give themselves a back door in the prior agreement, but it sounds like no. So that's great.
Yeah, no,
No, Stephanie, something related to essentially trying to back out of that, which the answer was no.
Yeah, you kind of started to say, like, someone who had read the agreement seemed to think that they could get out of it. And I was just going to offer, Nina's the expert. I'm a lawyer who no longer practices here, but having also read it, I felt like that was an inaccurate reading. And, the current draft is still on the table, right? So like that language, that's what we're starting to negotiate from as a town. So in its current format, I did not feel that there was wiggle room there.
Thank you. Any further comments related to, again, essentially backing out of a portion of the deal? Okay, Patty, if we could go to slide 12. Yep, construction schedule. If we could make this a little bigger, potentially.
Actually, it's locked into
Okay,
the PDF.
fair enough. Or maybe that was the issue that I was having.
Let me
So,
see.
okay, so the task force was told that we are approximately 3 years away from starting construction after final approval. So how do we have assurance that the developer's numbers will be anywhere close to the current numbers, or at the minimum will not be worse? Lynn, I don't if you wanted to kind of expand on this, but an experienced developers deals with these types of timeframes as part of their business. Its project and timeline is not unusual for mixed income deals. Federal and state governments have made funding affordable housing during the most recent recession, as well as during COVID-19 downturn, a priority due to the tremendous need to support the preservation and development of workforce housing. History has shown that developments with substantial amounts of affordable housing tend to be more resilient than a predominantly market rate development. And the LIHTC program for low-income housing tax credits has been around since the 1980s, and income limits change every year, which impact the rents. So as with any development, we would expect the numbers to reflect changes to rents and operating expenses, but really not to fluctuate widely. Any questions related to this construction schedule and changes to it? Lynn is available for those questions. Stephanie, please.
I guess I'm not totally clear on whether the question about numbers was construction costs or rent numbers. I guess my question just in general, like, isn't it Civico's risk on projecting those out, not the town's? And isn't that one of the benefits of the structure of this deal?
Correct, yes. Civico is literally changing these numbers every single day as things change. So they will continue to refine them through permitting, through through applying to the state for the credits, through getting construction bids in the door. And it is on them, if there is some sort of gap in financing, to go out and get that money. And if there isn't money available, then they will need to dip into their developer fees. But it is their responsibility to make the numbers work.
And I would elaborate on that, Stephanie. I think it does affect the town because part of our revenue stream is a percentage of the profit. And if they make less profit because of overhead and expenses, then that means less to the town. So we're kind of in a partnership with them in a way.
I don't disagree with that at all, Paul. Lynn's numbers showed that 10% is not a huge number. So it's minimal. I'm just saying, like, we had the talk about construction costs earlier. If construction costs go way up, the town is not on the hook for those. But yes, that 10% seems like the majority of our risk. And it doesn't seem like a huge one.
Lost you there. Did everybody else lose Stephanie?
The last was not at all a huge, and then went mute.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yep.
I was saying, yes, it seems like the extent of the risk to the town is in that 10%. It's not like we're on the hook for fluctuations in construction costs.
Right.
Yeah, and it was my question, and I was more trying to lead down the road. I mean, this is being presented as a revenue share and revenue opportunities. I think you got to the point. I mean, my view on it is the revenue, anticipating any sort of revenue distribution is not something we should be banking on or people should be excited about. And if we get any, it's great. It seems like every time we talk to Civico about numbers, and I know they move, I understand that, and this project's evolving, but the numbers have only gotten worse. And so I'm just trying to understand if the revenue share is something that should be optimistically viewed or is kind of a scratch ticket. And I look at it, it's a little bit like a scratch ticket.
Okay. Next slide, unless somebody, okay. So related to the Chamber of Commerce building. So looking for the cost expectations to renovate the Chamber building. And can you confirm that it would be fully accessible? This may be money the town can also ask to address parking issues, assuming Civico doesn't renovate the building. And can you look at the revenue would be available if the Chamber's Commerce building were leased for fair market rents or commercial tenants? So once Civico has an LDA with the town, they can perform this type of detailed building evaluation and design analysis for the Chamber of Commerce building in order to determine what the building can be used for. Therefore, they're not in a position today to provide any completely informed cost or income analysis. It would be irresponsible to use market rate retail rents this early on in this process for a number of reasons. One, retail spaces are typically not leased on spec. And coming off of COVID-19, it's even harder to determine what the leasing environment will actually be for retail after COVID. Therefore, Civico is being realistic by using conservative numbers for income for the Chamber of Commerce space. Any questions related to the Chamber of Commerce building? Again, this is actually still related to the Chamber building. So how many parking spaces would actually fit on there? And could we have the developer take down the building but not replace it? As this should still provide more expense reduction to the developer. Could mute somebody.
Hey, Pat. Oh, there he goes. Okay.
All right. So we could have the developer take the building down but not replace it, and this could actually provide some parking. So Civico, as the previous answer, so we could further evaluate this during the design and permitting process, but really the elephant in the room for that is the coordination with the MBTA and the MWRA sewer that's under the building. That would be required and will be an extensive process. Any questions related to the Chamber of Commerce building and potentially using that for parking? Okay. There's a lot of words here, and I'm sorry. But we just wanted to get all the questions on a page and get it and get an answer on this. Lynn, I'm wondering if it makes sense to if we could potentially get the memo up, or if we're I believe it's the next slide shows that analysis. So maybe if you could just explain this comparative financial analysis.
Sure. So there were a number of questions about trying to do a sensitivity analysis and compare and contrast different scenarios. So we basically looked, kind of just took the high level numbers for a number of different scenarios to try and see with basically what's on the table today, what would bring the most benefit to the town of Winchester. So one of the questions was, what if we make the project 51% affordable and 49% market rate? And you'll see that the acquisition value is actually a negative, and that's because they essentially lose that 250,000 per unit subsidy of, if you will, development costs that would come with the loss of the affordable units. So in that particular scenario, all things being equal, you're losing the $1 million purchase price. However, the tax revenue could be higher, and the refinance proceeds could be higher. So the next scenario that we looked at was what's on the table today, really what they applied for when they thought that there was going to be parking revenue. So they've updated the numbers that they gave you originally. And in this particular scenario, again, you have a negative number on the acquisition price because of needing to not have revenue from the parking garage to support debt. So in this particular scenario, your income cash flow is a little bit lower because you have your units at 80% of AMI, and your refinance proceeds are lower as well. I see a typo in there. So that the net benefits to the town, they're estimating, are 7.4. The next column is what I looked at, which is moving the 80% rents to 60% rents to bring revenue in for another 8 affordable units under the tax credit program. Their numbers are slightly off from mine because, again, the numbers change every single day. But it's pretty close to what was in my memo from earlier this week, which is, at the end of the day, brings in around 8.6 million in benefits to the town. The other model that they were asked to look at was 100% affordable model. And although this brings a little bit more money in from a purchase price perspective, the town is losing out on the tax revenue, as well as cash flow for supplemental lease payments. And then the overall value of the property is much lower when you go to refinance it because there's very little cash flow, and that that cap rate is going to be higher. We talked about that a few days ago. So, these were the scenarios. I know we talked about an all market rate, development a little bit earlier this week, probably just yesterday, in fact. And from doing this sensitivity analysis, the recommendation, at least from our office, to consider is that there are some substantial benefits to the town of moving the 80% units down to 60%. It does allow for more benefits over, this was this 15-year analysis with year 15 triggering a refinance event. So hopefully that answers some of the questions about looking at different ways that the numbers can kind of be moved around and that the unit mix can be moved around.
Thanks for that, Lynn. Are there any questions about kind of the financial analysis related to the different amount of affordable units that are in each of these scenarios that were asked of Civico?
I have a two-part question.
Sorry, Enzo's, sorry,
Okay,
Enzo.
Enzo.
All right,
Go ahead, Enzo. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Still not unclear why we didn't get the full market rate analysis just to see the maximum value of the property. I'd still like to see that. And then I can't figure out the numbers. So like this, if we went 50% affordable, but more market, where was the gain on the market? You're saying there's no additional gain on the market units? Or where is that income accounted for in this pro forma?
So, I mean, this pro forma doesn't show you where the income is, but it shows you that the real estate taxes are higher. For example, the real estate taxes are 3.7 versus my recommended model at 3.2. So you're instead of getting purchase price up front, you're getting real estate taxes because there are more market rate units, and therefore they bring in a higher rent. And you're getting more money in at the year 15 refinance. You're getting for the 466 versus the 321. So that's where the benefits to the town are in future cash flows versus an upfront payment. But there's also the loss of affordable units as well. So it's not everything is measured in numbers.
Okay, and then because my thought process was here, if we did a little less here, but more on maybe future projects like Washington Street, or forgive me for forgetting the name of the site that was just talked about last night, Converse Place, or I think that was the correct name. Maybe we could get more affordable housing in town and more revenue at the same time in different spots and different areas. And is it possible?
Yeah, there's in this particular scenario, there really is. That 40 unit mark is a very it's like the sweet spot of doing affordable housing deals, and that's why you'll see that the overall benefit with having more affordable housing, there's about $800,000 in revenue or proceeds to the town in the difference. So under the first scenario, there's no money to pay for the parking garage. So how do you account for that? They're basically saying, pay us to buy the property, or you need to give us money to buy the property. So they're losing that upfront money from the credits to build the parking garage. So you can't lose sight of that negative 620 under the acquisition price.
Okay, and thank you. And just to be clear, did I hear you say we didn't get the full market analysis if everything was market rate because you didn't think it was feasible?
I did a back of the envelope, and it isn't feasible because the equity requirement would be around 40% up front. But again, I was hired to review the existing project that is on the table. And it's my understanding the RFP had a very large affordable component in it. But I did want to say that I did a back of the envelope, and it's not viable because the equity requirement is no developer is going to walk in and pay that. And I think we've talked about this a few times already, which is that the cost of the parking, the cost of the commercial, the cost affiliated with the Chamber of Commerce, all of those make a full market rate development difficult because there's not the revenue stream to pay for those. And no, and Bill's on the phone. Bill, are you ever going to put 40% equity into a deal? Is Bill still here? Yeah. So that's the downfall of the all market rate. Besides, it's not the will of the town, from my understanding.
Sorry, I'm gonna let Enzo speak, and then Stephanie. Just as a quick note, there's only about 4 more questions, and we have about 30 minutes, and there's not going to be a lot at the end in terms of admin. So we have about 30 minutes left. It's this question plus 4 more. Enzo, go ahead.
Okay, sure. I think I agree with Paul there on the acquisition costs. I think it's counterintuitive to me as well that the more market units you have, the more you're going to get for the property, right? It just, that's what the appraisal value was based on, the number of market units, and the affordable units were appraised as 0. So the more market units you have, I think the more the property is. But we can talk about that another time. I mean, just in general.
And so the appraisal did not contemplate building 40 parking spaces for the town, keeping the Chamber of Commerce building, or building retail. so, and I don't think you were on the working session yesterday, but we did spend some time talking about that the appraisal that was done is not what's being in front of, in front of you today. And in reality, if you add together the purchase price of $1 million and the value of the parking at 2.8, you are at that appraised value. Right? So
Yeah, but the appraised value was based on, I mean, again, if you're.
It's based on an 80, it's based on an 80-20 deal with a vacant site, not having to pay for demolition and so on and so forth. I did read it, and it's just, I'm concerned that it's misleading in the sense that it's not apples to apples of what we're currently reviewing.
Agreed. I think that's the concern on both sides, right? Because it's, it appraised like a very particular, but whatever, a very particular scenario and not necessarily an affordable unit building or a market rate unit building, which is what I think different sides want. So I just, in general though, I would say these numbers are interesting, but do you have like the assumptions, how you came up with this? Like, is there a spreadsheet with assumptions or formulas on the side that you can share with? I think this goes for all the analysis. I think FinCom definitely wants to be able to dig into the specific numbers and understand
I can send
how
you,
they were calculated and how they went across. So yeah.
So I did attach to yesterday's memo. I did give you a 15-year operating pro forma just to show you how the money, flows through. I can give you PDFs that show income and again, sort of high level numbers that go with these different scenarios. If you think that that's going to be helpful, I think so. And then I don't have the 20-year pro formas that go with these. I only have the high level assumptions.
Okay, that's fine. I think the high level assumptions would be great, but I think for the 15-year pro forma, what you sent us was just numbers, right? So we don't, unless you want to go through every single number and tell us explain to us exactly how you calculated it. It's really hard for us to really understand how those numbers fit together, which we can do. I mean, we can do that offline if you'd like.
Yeah, the problem is those numbers come from a lot. They're pulling from a lot of different places. So there was no way to get them to you other than in numerical form. And so I'm very happy. I understand that you're with the finance committee and that's going to take place, I think, after this, but before the Board of Selectmen. I'm happy to sit and go through that line by line with you, and explain to you, where all the numbers come from and what, and what they represent.
Lynn, I'm just gonna jump in. So yeah, it sounds like that's like a linked spreadsheet issue.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so why don't
there are issues.
Okay, so we're gonna go Stephanie, Sumya, and then Pat, related to this comparative, comparative financial analysis. Stephanie.
Well, you mentioned other sites. Is there a reason why you think other sites could generate more revenue with higher affordability components?
I don't know about the revenue side of it. We'd have to analyze that when we came to it, but I know other sites are being considered, and if you can get us more units, I think that's a good thing. And I was just specifically talking about more revenue at this Waterfield site. So it could be a win-win for everybody. More affordable housing in town and more revenue from this particular site.
It seems like with what we're looking at here, and after our work is done, Enzo and his team have a lot to do looking at these, but Lynn's recommendation seems far and away the best financial outcome for the town based on the assumptions she's making.
Thank you, Sumya. You have a question? You're muted, Sumya.
Sorry. I just had a comment. It seems that if these units were market rate, it would be very difficult for the developer to make it profitable given the other needs of the town, such as the parking structure and the Chamber of Commerce building. The other point I wanted to make is that town meeting voted to make this Waterfield lot affordable. So I can understand why we didn't do the market rate analysis.
Thank you for the comment. Pat?
Just two things. One, Lynn, I think you're making some of my concerns, the things like the discounted retail, the Chamber of Commerce building, a lot of these things that were barriers in the development, I think have made it very difficult for this project to be revenue positive, and none of that would impact affordable housing at all. So I don't know, I might say it a different way than Paul, but I think there's potential in this project could be much more revenue positive without impacting affordable housing. One of my questions was the true straight up value as strictly as a traditional market value apartment. And that wasn't with the vision of blowing this thing up. It's a question that someone asked me. And I think town members have, what is the town passing on? What is this site worth? If it's worth 2 million and we're getting $1 million, then at least you make everybody happy. You're going to have no problem with the voters or town meeting. That's something that everybody's wondering that's not there. And it's not in Lynn's scope. So it's not really Lynn's fault, because that's not at all what she's supposed to be doing. It's really more of a town question that it would seem, whether it's Enzo's committee or town meeting, if I was a town meeting member, I'd want to know what the market value is in a traditional development, just at least so I know what decision I'm making. Doesn't mean I'm not going to still vote for the affordable component.
Any further questions related to the really the split of the market and affordable rate? I'm sorry, the market and affordable units, the ratio of the two. If not, we're going to keep moving forward. So next slide, please. So as you can, this question was kind of related. I guess I'll read it, but preparing a pro forma, which we kind of just saw with the town investment and calculations, which we just went through this. So this was, again, the main reason why Lynn Sweet was brought in is to develop a working model with input from key stakeholders, which Lynn has said she's willing to do and sit down and understand where those numbers are coming from. And she did complete this for the 20 market 40 affordable split scenario in the previous slide that we just saw, and is also in the memo from yesterday. So I don't, there might be a further question, but this is really related to the last question. So, but any questions about this one? All right, next slide, please. So FinCom, they really are extremely interested in looking at the language that's in the LDA for the definition of net operating revenue. It appears to be vague and include lots of costs that can be used to reduce the town's annual payments. For instance, it's not clear if principal loan payments are subtracted as costs. So as well as any capital expenditures that could increase the rents to the developer, but limit rentable payments to the town. So we really need to get a second review of this language to ensure that the rental payment is sufficient. So the definitions could obviously be reviewed as part of the LDA renegotiation, and the task force should make specific recommendations as to that. Any questions on really, the next question is very similar to this. It has to do with really kind of looking at a different type of definition. And so we'll go to the next slide. It's really looking at, again, like I said, a definition, specifically the sale of refinance. So they wanted, FinCom was looking to get a second review of this language, as well as from the lease accounting legal professionals that are well-versed in this area. The same thing, answer from staff is that definitions could be reviewed as part of the LDA renegotiations, and that the task force should make specific recommendations to a potential new definition related to excess profit.
Brian, just one thought for the task force to also consider. Points well taken, especially on the first one. The other piece of this to keep in mind that I think would be important if we do reopen the LDA and or the just for the lease, there also needs to be attention in terms of the future negotiations, just to be candid about how that's documented and the sort of the transparency of the costs, which is a different issue than how it's defined. But some of these issues get to how you can define it, but others get to sort of being able to look into their books. Just want to make sure that's sort of top of mind for folks too.
Stephanie, go ahead. Your hand's up.
Yeah. Mia, are these definitions locked in the LDA, or is it another thing that we would expect to see further iteration and finalization on between this and the lease? What governs, I guess, is my question ultimately.
I was struggling to find the mute while I was looking at the LDA language. The answer is, at this point, nothing is locked in the LDA because we can negotiate. But assuming let's say we had gotten the LDA approved, just for the sake of your question, the answer is they can be further defined in the lease. It's part of the point I was just making, Stephanie, is another way to say that is, even if you didn't change the definition of the elements of what operating expenses are, or what you get to count where in the waterfall, which I think if I were negotiating after an LDA, I would say are sort of key terms of it. You would, and you often do in these kind of deals that involve waterfalls like that, look at how you're going to make sure they're reasonable, they're not inflated, that there's sort of some check. What you do with disagreements, if you think the other side is going too high or too low on a particular item. So that all of that would normally be more in the lease than the LDA. The elements, are a little less likely to change. The second point about sale or refinance, again, agreed, that's a late add to the agreement, and with the benefit of more time, would be worth maybe adding more detail on.
Okay, super helpful. Thank you.
Any further questions related to the sale or refinance?
And you can definitely look at, we'd send some of the partnership agreement samples that are going to, be negotiated between the developer and the tax credit. Those documents have gobs of definitions in them, so it may be helpful to be operating under the same terms that they're operating under.
Thank you. I believe this is the last question. So Lynn rightly pointed out that the current language of the LDA allows the developers to get a guaranteed return of 8% of their developer equity in perpetuity. This truly is a holdback for the parking garage. Then the 8% payments should end once the full $600,000 fee is fully paid. This would be visible in the financial model number 1. This has been completed. 8% ends once the $600,000 is paid back. This will need to be included in the task force recommendations and in a renegotiated LDA. If anyone has questions related to this, this would be for Lynn. Enzo, go right ahead.
Yeah, not a question, more of a comment. I think I was looking for the latest and greatest LDA on the Waterfield site, but I didn't see it linked there. So I had an old copy that I was using from back when we were doing the advisory committee, but I don't think it's the final version, because I think I might have missed that one. So I just was wondering if we could post that.
The manager's office will be able to post that soon. I'm just gonna throw that there. Sorry, manager's office, but that's.
It'll be done tonight. If I can.
I was gonna say they're the backbone here, so
thank you.
I guess as a double thank you. Thank you, Patty, and everyone in the manager's office. You're making these meetings, I think, very productive behind the scenes. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And so I can actually email it to you once I get it.
Great. No, thank you so much.
Next slide, please. So I believe actually go all the way to the end, because I think we've actually gone through all of them. Those were the last ones that we didn't finish from the previous meeting. So if we go all the way to the end, it's just going to be talking very, very briefly about really here. So this is kind of an open question in terms of, do you need any help finishing the report in terms of, questions on the structure or what, things like that. But everything is going to be posted in terms of information. The recordings are on the website. All of the documents that we have discussed and reviewed will also be on the website. We're going to be looking for findings and recommendations by the morning of the 4th. That will allow staff to give comments so that we can, when we meet now on Friday the 8th next, which is the next time that this group is meeting, is Friday, October 8th, a week from tomorrow. So are there any questions on, in terms of the report?
Brian, it's Paul. I'd
Yep.
just like to repeat something I sent out an email today. I know that most of the general public, and I know there's a lot of information up there on the WinCam recordings and stuff for these meetings, but people are asking for the minutes. And I know we've talked about it in the last 2 meetings about getting the minutes approved and then up on the site. So hopefully we can do that sooner or later so the community feels like they're getting the complete transparency. I know we're giving them a lot, but I think people rather read the minutes than look at the hour-long or 2-hour-long video.
Fair enough. I believe the date is October 8th that all that will be up. Also, just as a fair warning that the minutes for these meetings, because there's so much background material and because there are recordings that are available all the time, the level of detail of discussion will probably not be, this is not going to be pages and pages and pages and pages of minutes. Just as a fair warning that there is in terms of transparency, everything is up. The recordings are available now. This recording will be available on WinCam for however long we want them to be available. The meetings will show discussion ensued about specific topics, who is there, if there were any votes, these types of things.
Sure, yeah, that's what they're intended for. That's what I think the assumption is what there would be appreciated. Great. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions related to finishing the report? Well, it's 6:47, and this is the first time we've finished without actually having to push agenda items to our next meeting. Staff is available for any questions leading up to your draft reports for Monday. So it's really important, not necessarily that you finalize those, but that at least that you give us something in draft form so that we can get and make those last 2 meetings, that we can hear your voice and that it gets into the report. So I don't have anything else on the agenda, and we can finish early unless anyone wanted to say anything. I wanted to again thank everybody really here, specifically for just being again out in public, expressing your point of view, being in this public discourse. I think it's really important and helps the process.
I'd second that statement. And Brian, thanks for taking the leadership role. And I know Beth's not here, and she went to another meeting, but wish her the best luck in her new leadership role.
We're all behind Beth and are happy to see her in this role. With that, I think it's a wonderful time to say goodnight. Thanks again for everybody. Thank you, WinCam. Thank you, Lynn, Patty, and everyone on the task force, Mina as well. Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you next time on the 8th. Have a good week.